Hey AP Langers, it's Dr. Clark, and this video is all about the film The Matrix and Jean Baudrillard's famous book, Simulacra and Simulation. Quick spoiler alert before we get any further. If you haven't already seen the film The Matrix, then crawl out from whatever rock you've been hiding under and go and watch it now. Good? Okay, let's get started. Along with the classic 1982 film Blade Runner, The Matrix is widely considered to be one of the best postmodern sci-fi films ever made. To demonstrate its self-consciously postmodern leanings, it even featured Jean Baudrillard's famous book, Simulacra and Simulation, prominently in one of the opening scenes, and included a direct quote from the book at the key moment at which Morpheus introduces Neo to the desert of the real. So naturally, after the film came out, a lot of people went to Baudrillard himself and asked his opinion of it. But his reaction was a bit disappointing to its fans because he didn't seem too impressed with it. In fact, he said that the film stemmed mostly from misunderstandings of his book, and went on to say that no film could ever do justice to Simulacra and Simulation. Wow, a book so complex that it's impossible to adapt into a film? There could be a lot of reasons Baudrillard didn't like the film, but one of the main issues he had was that in The Matrix, Neo escapes from the simulation and enters the real world to join Morpheus and his band of freedom fighters. But according to Baudrillard's theory, that would be impossible. Baudrillard explains the impossibility of rediscovering an absolute level of the real, because in the postmodern age, according to Baudrillard, the real is no longer possible. You see, hyperreality is not merely an illusion that is pulled over your eyes to blind you from the truth, as Morpheus says. No, it's far more insidious than that. As Baudrillard writes in the epigraph to his book, the simulacrum is never that which hides the truth. It is the truth that hides the fact that there is none. According to Baudrillard, there is no truth behind the postmodern simulation that we're all trapped inside. That's the Wachowskis' most fundamental mistake. Baudrillard himself uses the example of the Borays Tale, which is a short story written in 1946 called On Exactitude in Science. The premise of the story is that in a certain kingdom, mapmaking, or cartography, has become so developed that mapmakers keep making larger and larger maps to more exactly represent the territory. They go so far with this insane project that eventually they create the ultimate map, which is as large as the kingdom itself and which matches it exactly in every detail. Now, obviously, this would not be a very useful map, and that is Borays' whole point. The usefulness of a map depends on the fact that it's a smaller version of that which it represents. We use maps to tell us where to go in the real world, and the fact that they aren't as detailed as the real world they represent is not a flaw at all. Borays' whole point was about how science works and how the theories and mental maps that science creates are useful, even if they're not exact or 100% complete. But Baudrillard takes this allegory one step further. He notices something that most readers don't. There's a strange note at the end of the story which says that in the deserts of the west of the kingdom, there are peasants who live inside the map to this very day. Think about it. They give up the real and live in the map. And now, according to Baudrillard, it is the real world that is disintegrating beneath the map. The simulation has not only hidden reality, it has destroyed it. And in the postmodern condition, according to Baudrillard, we all live in a hyper-real simulation of reality, not created by cartographers like in the Borays Tale, but created instead by mass media and the internet. It seems that the philosophical implications of the Matrix are actually more closely aligned with a much older philosophical idea, Plato's Allegory of the Cave. In that story, there were prisoners trapped inside a cave, and all they could see was the false reality of the shadows on its walls. But eventually, they're freed to discover the true reality that exists outside the cave, the way Neo is freed from the Matrix. That's a much more comforting idea than Baudrillard's melancholic nihilism. But if the Wachowskis' goal was to put Baudrillard's ideas on screen, it seems they fell a bit short. For Baudrillard, hyperreality emerges through a series of stages in which the ideas and images we cling to slowly disconnect themselves from reality and eventually become completely separated from any connection to the real world at all. Any 21st century human knows that there are many different realities that people can inhabit in postmodern times. Some people believe the world is flat, others that there are aliens in Area 51, others that the Illuminati controls everything. There are conservative realities, there are liberal realities, there are Republican realities, there are Democrat realities. It all depends on what mass media you're consuming, which websites you're clicking on, which channels you're watching. Our reality is not created by the cartographers of the Borays Tale anymore. It's now created by the mass media that we expose ourselves to. I get it. Most of you who are watching this video right now are probably convinced that what you believe is real and what you know is true, and that anyone who believes anything differently are absolutely wrong. But the funny thing is, they think the same thing about you. You can turn on Fox News and discover one set of facts and then switch over to MSNBC and discover a completely different world. You might feel like Neo and think you've freed yourself from a false reality. But of course, Baudrillard's whole point is that neither is real or true. They're both simulations. You're just living in a different map. So let's say you're a truth seeker and you really and sincerely want to figure out what's really true. Where do you go? To Google? To the internet? I had a student once who was honestly convinced that the earth is flat, and he sent me link after link containing evidence that this was true. The whole idea sounds crazy to me, but another person's simulation always seems crazy to anyone outside of it. Think about it. Most Americans in 1999, when The Matrix takes place, would have said that Morpheus is crazy. But the crew of the Nebuchadnezzar would say that all of those Americans are crazy and deluded by the Matrix. Face it, the side you take in today's political debates probably has much more to do with your value system, your political convictions, and your pre-existing biases than it does any real facts or truth. It all depends on which news shows you watch, which news feeds you read, and which social media you consume. It depends on which Matrix you believe in. If The Matrix really was a film version of Simulacra and Simulation, then Zizek would have been right, and Neo would have emerged from the Matrix only to find that the real world Morpheus was selling him was just another simulation. Well, either way, The Matrix is still a great film, but if we want to find a perfect adaptation of Baudrillard's theory, I guess we'll have to keep looking. In our next episode, we'll see if Christopher Nolan's Inception comes any closer. Until then, thanks for listening. I'm Dr. Clark.